Not a problem.
Okay, happy to be here. Roy Brown again with Vinny, Vinny B, and we have a special guest today, Dr. Leonard Horowitz, really a legend in the space of truth. Dr. Horowitz has a tremendous background in activism. I first came to know about him about a year and a half ago when I saw one of his explanations videos on the 528 hertz frequency healing frequency, an amazing discovery that he has really fleshed out, and really it ties into the battle that we see between good and evil in the world today, and how they're using frequencies to manipulate us both, positively, as Dr. Horowitz has shown us through 528, but also negatively, getting off of that frequency. But we'll get into that. First, I wanted to have Vinny talk about his friend, Dr. Horowitz, who he's known for some time. I think their first meeting was maybe 10 years ago. Vinny, would you like to explain your background with Dr. Horowitz, and then we'll start
Yeah,
asking questions?
sure. Thank you, Roy, and thank you, Dr. Horowitz, for coming on. The yeah, about a year ago, like you were talking about, was the show Horowitz did with Johnny Cerrucci, which was amazing. And both those that video was removed from YouTube. I tried to post it, and it was lasted 2 days and was removed. It was an amazing job. But yeah, there was me and Horowitz met 10 years ago, and it was actually I was reaching out to him about the 528 frequency, which we'll get into. And and there was a lot of drama back then with that. Alex Jones was the big name, of course, and there was a guy named Anthony Hilder who was connected to Alex Jones. And Anthony Hilder was a big player. And we ended up on our show allowing Dr. Horowitz to confront Hilder. And Horowitz, everybody watching thought Horowitz basically looked good, and Hilda looked like, pretty bad. But then even after the show, Hilda got caught lying, and we had physical evidence with his connection to Timothy Patrick White, and we had physical evidence, and YouTube removed the video. At the time, Horowitz's amazing partner, Sherry Kane, I used to talk to all the time. So, I did a lot more with her back then. And I remember her going after YouTube and everyone. She was like a pit bull. She was fighting back, and we did a lot. And it brought out a lot about COINTELPRO and this and that. And since then, me and Horowitz have been basically, I feel like I've been tied to him since then because of that show. And we've been friends for over 10 years. And whenever I hear people talk about him being a Knight of Malta, or slandering him, really, it right away takes me back to the Hilder stuff. And, I would like
Well,
to
why don't
just,
we
yeah,
let
talk,
Dr. Horowitz tell us
Horowitz say a little
all
bit.
about it? I personally, just real quick, I didn't know much about Anthony Hilder. I looked in his background that he has a musical background, and that you may have worked with him at some point in time in the past and known him. But maybe we'll start there, and then I'd like to hear all about how you've fluoride, vaccines, all those things as a medical doctor, how you got involved in all this, and maybe just start with that story, and then we can get into 528.
Well, sure. Thanks for inviting me, folks. Anthony Hilder was one of the chief media agents for counterintelligence for Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Crime Syndicate is what I call it. You have the FBI today being outrageously criminal in its coverage or its prosecution of the Biden laptop from hell, for example. That's just one little tiny event. You see, the CIA has about 10,000 agents, and there's a whole segment of FBI that works with CIA that Vinny and I know really was intimately connected, not just to Anthony Hilder, but his superior, which was a fellow by the name of Ted Gunderson, who was J. Edgar Hoover's subordinate. And Gunderson was the Division 5 chief in Los Angeles who was credited for capturing and prosecuting Bobby Seale. You had the FBI engaged in the Black Panther, anti-Black Panther movement, and the dirty tricks, the Black Ops against the Black Panthers and Malcolm X. They took him out as a community organizer. He was an outstanding, spirit-filled community organizer that anyone you see that gets famous or gets a lot of attention and celebrity gets targeted. You get on the radar screen of the National Security Crime Syndicate, CIA and FBI. The leaders of that was from J. Edgar Hoover down to Ted Gunderson, then to Anthony Hilder, who was the Hollywood film producer, really the grade B or C lousy films. But that's where I first met Anthony Hilder. He contacted me, he and his agents contacted me, and they asked me to, my screen just went down. I don't know
Oh, I'm
why.
sorry. I'm doing a share screen of a Wikipedia entry on Hilder.
I got you, okay.
I've got you on the side here. Sorry about that.
No problem. So essentially, I was contacted by Hilder to be interviewed. And so I gave Hilder an interview, and it went pretty well, and he produced some film with it. And then he interviewed me again and again and again, a total of 6 times over a period of about 3 or 4 years. And every time he was asking me the same questions over and over again. So I knew something was wrong. And it wasn't until Sherry Kane, as Vinny introduced, who was a brilliant investigative journalist, an outstanding activist, and an avenger against child sex traffickers and women and children who have been abused. Sherry was brilliant, inspired, and on fire for helping those people. And you see that Ted Gunderson was central to the FBI's and what we call today the deep state and Capitol Hill's pedophilia operations. So in the news yesterday, you had John Podesta, who was named as a suspect in devil doing with the Democrats and the FBI. Well, that's exactly where Sherry Kane determined to, and really she unwound and unraveled the syndicate, the actual racketeering enterprise serving the National Security Crime Syndicate, deep state, operating principally in America. And then upon the revelations, we had to presume, and it was true, the presumption was accurate, that Anthony Hilder and Ted Gunderson were the principals in the creation of what today is called the Patriot Movement or the conspiracy theory movement,
right?
The conspiracy theorists. This is where you begin to get the understanding that it's all controlled. All of everything that we're seeing on media, whether it's independent or mainstream, is controlled on some levels, and in fact, the top levels, by Central Intelligence, propaganda agents, as well as FBI operatives. And that's what Sherry and I busted, and Vinny knows the story.
So if you, and I, just to pick up, I'm getting a bounce here. I'm sorry. Are you guys hearing me okay? Okay.
No, there's an echo with you now.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop my share, I think. That may be better.
Yeah, on my screen, you've got Wikipedia.
Yeah, I pulled that up on Hilder. I was while you were talking.
That's all right. Yeah. I'm just commenting that Wikipedia totally pulled down my entire bio.
Okay.
English version has no Dr. Leonard Horowitz, and I actually published on on the website called waronwethepeople.net. Waronwethepeople.net. I actually posted under the counterintelligence operatives, Google, YouTube, Wikipedia articles that include the editors of Wikipedia being CIA operatives, propagandists, discussing whether or not they should pull down my bio. And the consensus was not to, because I had achieved already by 2008, 2009, a large celebrity following. a large number of people internationally supporting my work. I'm the author of 20 some odd books, like 25 books now, 7 documentary films, 2015 Best Film of the Year for the movie Unvaxxed, a docu-commentary for Robert De Niro. I'm among the world's leading experts in vaccine toxicity, and I'm a heavy activist. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I am a vaccine abolitionist.
Good for you.
All should be abolished. At any rate, I was targeted in my Wikipedia site, like Vinny is talking about censorship. I was one of the first names to heavily be censored. Google, YouTube pulled 157 of my videos down, and that prompted me to start with Sherry Kane, the revolutiontelevision.net. Revolutiontelevision.net has much of the works that have been pulled down and censored elsewhere.
Well, I was going to dovetail on what you were talking about, and I mean, your notoriety is too high for them to try to disappear you at this stage, I assume. You've been on you've had televised debates. I mean, you've been at this for such a long period of time. That has a power in and of itself. And I think whatever they might try to do is spin right or left, what you're messaging. But I think certainly they'd be risking a lot by just trying to take down your Wikipedia page. But all that being said, you mentioned Ted Gunderson, who many would think would be equally legendary in his status as being outspoken against child trafficking. He mentioned he famously got involved with the school is the name of the school escapes me. You would know it, where he went in and supposedly uncovered tunnels and got into depth about the satanic ritual abuse that was occurring at this Los Angeles daycare. But I think the point that you're making is this was a front. This was essentially a front to front run the anti-human trafficking, the real human trafficking that occurs is being fronted by the FBI and protected, so that their operations, for whatever purposes they are, blackmail or even occulted purposes, can be ongoing and never truly be exposed. So your former partner, who's a wonderful woman, I've seen her many times on your other mentioned. I don't know that I've ever seen her on a video, but mentioned your collaboration. Can you go in a little more detail about how she uncovered that human trafficking connection with Gunderson and the fact that he's not the person all the truthers think he is?
Sure. What happened was that as Sherry began to examine Hilder and his network, and those that were defaming me and literally targeting me terribly, destroyed my family, destroyed my businesses, came after me. 2016, I was forced into bankruptcy, hoping the bankruptcy court would stop this persecution. And unfortunately, it was as corrupt as the state courts. Sherry started to look at emails and the connections between correspondences of Gunderson and Hilder, and then determined that those who were like a cell of agents that were assigned to defame me and censor me, they included Al-Masiat, the alias Dr. True Ott. It was a fake name. True is false. It's part of deception where your mind thinks, oh, this is true. It's an automatic registration of truth. Right. While it's a complete fraud. So Sherry started to look at the connections, and then she would reveal them to me, and I was in denial, frankly. It took me about 3 years with Sherry's prodding to finally realize that she was accurate. I had been good friends with Gunderson. I considered myself good friends. I would hug him whenever I saw him. We'd go out to lunch together because we were on the same stages together through Patriot Movement and Conspiracy Con and all sorts of preparedness expos. So I was running and lecturing in the same circuits as Gunderson, had no idea he was a double agent. And Sherry actually came out with this for us. And then the real smoking gun was when Sherry happened to receive correspondence from Barbara Hartwell, who was Ted Gunderson's partner, assigned partner. She was a psychological operations agent for the CIA. So you have this.
I've met her, Roy.
Yeah.
A few times.
Barbara Hartwell was working with CIA. Gunderson was within FBI, but he was a double agent also working for CIA. So Hartwell contacted Sherry and they began to develop a beautiful friendship. And Barbara and I go way back too. But bottom line was Barbara said to Sherry, I'm going to try to dig up something in a chest of drawers that I haven't seen for years, but it's in there. So she went into her chest, pulled out a letter that Gunderson had written to Barbara stating that he was marrying. Now, this was on FBI stationery, that he was marrying Diana Rively, who was the Church of Satan heiress. That links to exactly what you were talking about, how Gunderson was involved was in San Francisco, the Presidio child abuse case, where there was over 60 children in a school there that were abused, and that incriminated Michael Aquino, who was actually the successor in interest to Anton LaVey, who started the Church of Satan and the Satanic Bible, issued the Satanic Bible. And so he left his estate, and Diana Rively obtained a large amount of that estate and power. And the successor for that was involved in the child abuse ring at the Presidio in San Francisco.
And a full lieutenant colonel, I believe, in an active military. I believe he was a colonel. Excuse me, it was not Latin lieutenant colonel.
That's right. It was colonel.
And some rumored to have moved on to the NSA afterwards.
Yes, and Michael Aquino, Colonel Michael Aquino, actually, you can watch on a video that we have up on revolutiontelevision.net. It's also available in YouTube still. I don't think it's been taken down because Geraldo Rivera is engaged in interviewing Aquino and Gunderson on the same set. And they're playing good cop, bad cop. And it's a propaganda piece to get you to think, okay, well, there is some amount of Satanism and we're dealing with that, but it's hurting some people, but it's not really that bad. That was what it was. It was a good cop, bad cop, Hegelian dialectic, thesis, antithesis, manipulation of the population through media. So that's still up. And when Sherry then identified this whole ring and then shared it with me, then we started to produce articles and videos exposing it. We ended up actually going right into the Lion's Den at the main national conference. It was called Conspiracy Con, where you had all the agents were gathering and all the people that thought that the agents were good guys, and they were all gathered. You had 400, 500 people in the audience. Sherry and I got up, and this segment is up on revolutiontelevision.net also, exposing them royally. And that was the end of it. That was the end of this entire industry that Gunderson and Hilder had virtually alone created. Gunderson with his directives, his virtual platoon of propagandist agents, defamation agents, trolls on the internet. He ran this group. And then Hilder, who produced the Hollywood grade B and C films that persuaded people. One of his titles was The Illuminazis, Illuminati. So everything Illuminati and conspiracy theory, this was the genre which was taken over, actually created, like in communism.
Oh, and also to add for Roy, because me and Roy, we're in a big believer that they like to blame Jews, and that was another big thing people love to portray, like Sherry Kane, she comes from the bloodline of Cain, and it's the Jews, and And these were people that love to blame the Jews. And me and Roy, we know that's not true. We point out the Vatican and Rome and other issues. So just wanted to throw that in there too. They were famous for that back then.
Yeah, well, in my opinion, as a Jew, as actually a Christian Jew, I'm a Messianic Jew, so I'm an outcast from the Jewish religion, and I'm, kind of like not quite accepted yet in many different religious sects, because,
Good for you.
I'm different, but what I can tell you is that there's another level. When you peel back the layers of this religious onion and the Jews' involvement in what's taking place globally today, you have a really excellent understanding of the deception, in fact, of what Jesus had preached. Beware of those who call themselves Jews,
Right.
who are not.
Right.
Exactly.
So,
and with the interlocking secret societies, religion becomes less of an issue. It's all towards one really kind of Luciferian satanic outcome that they're working towards, in my estimation. And I think what you're showing is that the power of the U.S. government is behind these quote unquote satanic rituals, but also this rampant human trafficking, that it's protected. It's protected by powers that are extremely high up, powers that can bring the FBI and CIA to heel and make them do as they wish, but that can also be fought against effectively, as you did at Conspiracy Con and elsewhere, to really expose them. And I think Gunderson now, there's a huge reassessment of who Gunderson was, largely on the power of your work. But I think there are a lot of other critiques out there as to who this guy was. I mean, an active FBI agent, for decades, and then all of a sudden he turns into a truther. That's obviously suspect. So this Hilder guy also seems to have a background in music, and it seems to be a focus of, let's call them the they, or whatever we want to call them for now. We seem to, Vinny and I are pretty well convinced that it is a global network, connected with Jesuits, Freemasonry at the highest levels, but that they control governments subtly and sometimes overtly. But music is a very big aspect of what they're, and it never occurs to people that this would be a part of their arsenal used against us. So Hilder seemed to also have a background in music as well, entertainment production. Actually, let me step back. First, I'd like to have you talk a little bit more about, as a doctor, vaccines, your work against vaccines, and maybe even throw in fluoride when you became kind of anti-fluoride, and how, and that kind of thing. And then we'll get into the music side. Sorry, but maybe you can tell us a little more about your vaccine background.
Well, having lost my mother to the swine flu vaccine in 1976, and then basically, it took me several years to wake up, to realize that my mother had been killed by the Merck swine flu vaccine, and that then in between 1993 and 96, one of the books that you can see in my background, Emerging Viruses, AIDS and Ebola. It's the international best-selling book in the entire field of lab-created viruses and communicable diseases, Emerging Viruses, AIDS and Ebola. And that's where I got the knowledge to understand what's taking place in Fauci's inner circle. I have a Harvard degree in public health, and master's in public health degree, postdoctoral. I taught anatomy and histology, microanatomy at Tufts University. And I'm very, I was on the faculty at Harvard. I'm very well aware of what's going on in the field of laboratory created viruses. My latest book is called COVID Coup, The Rise of the Fourth Reich, heavily censored. Amazon Kindle, which was the printer, totally sabotaged the launch. I had no hardcovers to send out to people who were pre-ordering hardcovers. It was just, it's been dreadful. I virtually, at my age, at this point in my career, I've given up. If it's not of God, I'm not interested. And basically, if God tells me to do something, or the angels of direction tell me to do something, I'll do it. But otherwise, I'm kind of like retired at this point.
Understood.
And but bottom line is that, Sherry and I basically began to expose the devil doers that were putting together the poisonous vaccines. I personally sued about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, right away, actually, Pfizer and Moderna. I produce a nutraceutical. You can kind of like see a little bit of it in the window in my cabinet in the back. You can see it says OxySilver. And that is a competitor against vaccinations that was being disparaged by Hearst Media and big tech, big pharma, big media, big pharma. And so I sued, and I had a pretty, I think, successful time for what energy I put into the lawsuit, but against Pfizer and Moderna. But I learned tremendous amount of discovery evidence and what's really taking place with the vaccinations. And that's what the new book, COVID Coup, is about. I began to realize about 1994, 95, the book Emerging Viruses came out in 96. And I had realized at that point that the government of the United States had created the AIDS viruses and the Ebola viruses. And I found the contracts by miracle, literally miracle. I reprinted the United States government contracts under which numerous AIDS-like and Ebola-like viruses were bioengineered by the Army's 6th top biological weapons contracting lab called Litton Bionetics. They're the medical subsidiary of the mega military weapons contractor that was called Litton Industries. And essentially, I went through the entire history, including all of the science, and reprinted the scientific citations, and then finally the government contracts, which put my name on the radar screen. And that's why in 2008, when Barack Obama was running for president, he was for about 3 weeks chastised with his minister, Reverend Jeremiah Wright, who, if you watch Fox News, Reverend Wright is smeared.
He held up your book.
Well, that's what Reverend Wright said when he defended against the media defamation. He said, "Have you read Dr. Leonard Horowitz's book, Emerging Viruses, AIDS and Ebola?" And so I was on CNN for briefly, and then an hour-long segment they completely censored. They totally censored because I basically told them the truth in sound bites that they couldn't alter. And so I gave them nothing except the truth that shall set us free, and they basically ended up censoring it.
Yeah.
That's background on vaccines.
Yeah. On that, let me ask you, since you've written extensively on it, what is your definition of kind of a bioengineered virus? Is it, and how does it work? My view of this is there's a lot of debate even in the truth community as toxin versus virus, delivery mechanism. Are they trying to get you with the virus, or are they trying to get you with the vaccine afterwards by engineering the panic and the fear, as they've just done? And so as a scientist, as someone who's looked into all the science of this, how does it work scientifically? What are they targeting? What aspects of the body are they targeting, and how are they? Where do they want the biggest bang for their buck? Is it in the vaccine or the toxin virus that they're injecting into you, or I'm sorry, they're getting to you somehow? And I guess that goes one more thing, more like transmissibility. Are these things transmissible, or is it more of a controlled environment where they're spreading these diseases that way?
All of the above.
Okay.
They're trying to kill you most profitably every which way possible.
Right.
It used to be called the Russian biological cocktail method of warfare, or actually poisoning people with chemicals which wreak havoc with the immune system. Your immune system goes down, you become more susceptible to opportunistic infections, that now you begin to realize it's a dual approach to population control, depopulation, and then who's making the money? Take a look at the ads, everything from, you go on an AIDS drug, it's, 25,000 a year. You go on a eczematous dermatitis medication today, Skyrizi, for example. Tens of thousands of dollars you spend to do what? To actually try poorly, poisonously, to combat the vaccine injuries such as eczema. Eczema, which is these rashes, these kind of like boils, itchy, red, swelling, oozing sores that come out. Your skin is your secondary detox organ. Your liver is your primary. When your liver is shot, it's coming out your skin. The vaccines inject poisons, foreign proteins, foreign RNA, foreign DNA from bacteria, viruses, fungus, yeast, chicken embryo, bovine fetal serum, monkey kidney tissues, and with smallpox, it's cow pus. You might as well add eye of newt, because it's an outrageous witch's brew. It makes no sense medically whatsoever. It is a con. The entire industry of vaccinology is a con job.
Right.
It used to be in health science, the doctrine, which was accurate, was that the germ is nothing. The terrain, your body chemistry, is everything. So if you want immunity, have a high immunity, these germs are not going to have a major impact. But all these multiple assaults with the cocktail method of killing people most profitably, now you end up having what we're witnessing.
Are you aware of the experiments conducted by Cornelius Rhodes in Puerto Rico on cancer through they were funded by Rockefeller?
Yes, I reviewed those years ago. Those are cited in my book, Emerging Viruses, AIDS, and Ebola.
Okay, and just for the audience sake, early on in the 1930s, this was pre Fort Detrick. It was actually became part of Fort Detrick and part of Sloan Kettering. Dr. Cornelius Rhodes, who was a military doctor, received funding from Rockefeller to hopefully inject cancer into several Puerto Rican nationals. One of the reasons they could get away with this was that Puerto Rico was a territory at the time. They are not part of the Constitution. They could not avail themselves a lot of the protections of the Constitution. So that's why they chose Puerto Rico. But in letters back to Rockefeller, they explicitly detailed their desire to create cancer in human beings. And this was prior really to the broad cancer network that we have today. And I believe Sloan Kettering's cancer division, what have you, arose after World War II. So it was with this research in their back pocket. Do you believe that cancer is part of this agenda? That the whole treatment of cancer, the way that they're going about it, I'd just like to hear your thoughts as a doctor on that kind of thing. It didn't seem cancer was as prevalent as a cause of death maybe 200 years ago as it is now. And we know that Rockefeller has funded medicine, has created a sense. Rockefeller was funded the initial creation of the pharmaceutical industry. Obviously now it's public and massive, but was behind that. I believe Rockefeller was also behind the change in tonality when we talk about 528. Those settings. So if people want to look at one source, they can look at that. Now there are people above Rockefeller, as we know. Rockefeller came into his wealth because we became essentially an oil-driven nation, and that's not by coincidence. But certainly he used his money to make changes on a broad spectrum of things. Just quickly on cancer, do you have any thoughts on that industry and how that works?
Yes, I do. Tremendous amount of knowledge on it. That's the book, Emerging Viruses, goes into and actually what made it a bestseller is reprinting the government contracts, as I mentioned, of what was called the, quote, special virus cancer program.
There
In
we go.
military circles, the word special connotes secret. So this was the secret virus cancer program, wherein dozens of universities and heavily involved US Navy, Naval Intelligence, Naval Biological Labs were involved in the creation of various cancer-inducing viruses. You see, HIV/AIDS was invented, created in a lab as a recombinant of leukemia, lymphoma, sarcoma, cancer viruses. And today, the biggest secret regarding COVID is that it's spike protein antigen, that little thing that they shows, little spikes coming up out of the virus. That's the bioweapon component that's laboratory engineered, that contains in it, the major component is from the AIDS virus. It is a spike protein antigen that contains 4 major genes from the AIDS virus. So it should not have been called COVID-19 SARS. It should have been called COVID-19 SARS HIV. And that's where Fauci and his inner circle, having patents starting in the 1980s with the AIDS virus research, where they identified this spike protein genetic component, the attachment, when the virus attaches to the human cell, it does so by that gain of function, bioweapon, lab manipulation. That was evident. And in fact, Jim Jordan today in Congress is saying we're going to investigate heavily January 31st, February 1st, 2020 at the National Institutes of Health and Fauci's organization, NIAID. We're going to investigate why these guys panicked. What was the panic insofar as COVID-19 on those dates? And the panic was what I'm telling you. They're censoring right now. Even Jim Jordan is censoring the fact that what was causing the group to go into crazy tizzy was the fact that the Indian paper, quote, that's the quote, it was identified as the Indian paper that was published by Prashant Pradhan, who is the IBM company. Their top computer is called Watson. Prashant Pradhan was the geneticist who was in charge of Watson computerization and analyses for genetic history. The evolution of the DNA and the genetics of viruses was one of the capabilities that was input into the Watson that Prashant Pradhan and 8 scientists, mostly from India and China, they had then determined and published briefly online. And as the editor and chief of Medical Veritas International Inc., I received an early copy of that. And then after I saw what they had published, which was a very sophisticated scientific analysis, it was censored. It was pulled from the internet. And the group was disparaged and discouraged in publishing this information. So that's in Fauci emails. If you read Fauci emails carefully on or about January 31st, February 1st, 2020, and you will see his inner circle. He's in correspondence with all of the devil doers, those complicit agents in the controlled medical establishment, the cartel that is operating this ruse, this plandemic. They were knowledgeable and very concerned, and that's where they said, we're going to censor this. In their meetings of that weekend, that was a Saturday and Sunday, all night long. The emails go all night long. They're back and forth from Europe. There's a main mover and shaker who is in charge of pretty much everything that can cover up. He is with the Burroughs Wellcome Organization. James Farrar, his name, James Jeremy Farrar, the top man overseeing Fauci and everybody else, going back to England, going back to the big money that was invested from the royals of England, you begin to see heavy globalist deep state control over the lab theory of COVID. And so that's basically a response to your question. The viruses were engineered for examining, producing viruses and developing supposedly vaccines to cure the viruses and the cancers that they would induce. That was the special virus cancer program. That was the main objective. And of course, to develop a vaccine to cure cancer, you have to take a cancer patient, you have to extract the viruses and the contaminated cells, cancer cells from that patient. You then isolate the viruses. Now you chop them apart, you put them into other species, you see how they can jump species. You can mutate them, hybridize them, recombine them, bioweaponize them to actually cause that spike protein attachment and transmission. That's what it was all about, starting clearly by the early 80s. They had fairly sophisticated ways of doing this. It started actually, when you go back in history, started to be of great concern in 1962. I could tell you why, but
I mean, well, the whole idea that we would operate Fort Detrick in a quote unquote peacetime environment, when their full operation is mainly to poison, figure out different ways to poison people and kill them without, in a silent fashion. That is the nascence from my understanding of all of this, and then that is then sent out after it's fully developed through the channels of the health apparatus, the government health apparatus that we have, the FDA, the CDC, World Health Organization, and it's weaponized against us. And actually, it's interesting that you mentioned the Queen of England investing in this. Rishi Sunak, the current prime minister, came up through a hedge fund called Thalim, and the founder of that hedge fund is one of the founders of Moderna. And he supposedly did it when he's a Frenchman. I forget his name offhand. I could look it up if I'd known we were going to talk about him. Easily find it. You can find it easily enough online. But he supposedly did it because his wife contracted cancer and then got over it. Certainly the early 90s, they knew something was coming along this line, because I believe Moderna came in 2000 or early 2000s. Many speculate that Moderna is for mode RNA, stands for an RNA method of delivery of this poison. They were setting up with billions of dollars to make billions of dollars on this. Bill Gates famously saying he makes 120 to 100 to 1 on every vaccine he invests in. So this group of people, they figured out a way to both weaponize but also capitalize, as you mentioned, on these mass movements, these mass pandemics, and essentially, I would call them, for lack of a better term, the Fabian socialists. It's a massive global group of people. Well, I'm sorry, it's spread wide. It's a small elite group of people who seek both to reduce world population but also to profit off it. In that regard, the Rockefeller Foundation has been at the forefront of these folks in everything they've been involved in. And actually, it's a full spectrum involvement. They're fighting against humanity at every turn. And you've mentioned a few. I'd like to then switch this over now to what we were talking about.
I just
with
wanted to
respect
ask him one question real quick, if you don't mind. Because he was talking about the spike protein. Before we get off that, I wanted to ask you, Len, I've seen a lot of videos where people are showing that some of the people that have taken these shots, they have like some type of weird growths in them, or people are like, they're showing like doctors taking things out of people. Do you know anything about this? Is this just maybe some thing on
Clotting, is
YouTube
that
or
what you're thinking of, Ben? Kind of
something?
the large blood clots that are coming out of
Yeah, the
folks?
blood clots that are coming out. I was going to ask your opinion on that.
Yeah, that's why I would highly recommend everybody get a PDF ebook of COVID coup, the rise of the Fourth Reich. It's up on healthyworldstore.com in the books and ebook section. It's called COVID coup, the rise of the Fourth Reich. And it goes into what you guys may not know and what most people don't know, and what's been heavily censored is the principal function of the vaccines. I suspect strongly the Pfizer, Moderna, mRNA vaccines, but clearly there's no question that the new vaccine technology includes this deeper, darker, totally evil agenda that's called transhumanism. In other words, imagine injecting a vaccine that could enable the global industrialists to control not only every aspect of what's going on in your body, but collect the data, the real-time data, wirelessly. That's transforming human beings into what's a virtual cyborg colony and robots that really can be completely controlled, manipulated, commercialized. And when you start to examine the power of DNA to store data and transmit data, now you begin to see a whole other area that involves transhuman. I don't say it's evolution, it's devolution. It's a satanic manipulation of the population to control civilization, actually convert normal human civilization into robotics and artificial intelligence controlled operations. Now, what evidence is there for this is what you're talking about, Vinny. You see the blood clots and a lot of the inflammatory reactions and poisonous disease induction that we're witnessing deals with what is called the hydrogel, the vaccine hydrogel, the coating of the vaccine that delivers the spike protein antigen and the mRNA to alter the DNA function. That hydrogel, 2 words, hydro means water, gel is a lipid like fat-like substance that becomes biocompatible, and because of the water component, with water being a liquid crystal superconductor of energy, sound and light signaling through water is excellent. Now you inject in this hydrogel what's called graphene, which is one of the most advanced energy transmission devices. It's a double layer, what's called a bilayer graphene hydrogel, which enables the brain cloud connection. The transhumanistic movement features the brain cloud connection that Elon Musk has been heavily investing in and actually promoting. The concept that our realities, like the metaverse, is going to be engaging our real reality, that we're going to be connected to the cloud, that our entire experience on Earth will be intertwined with wireless 5G, 6G, whatever G speed in the telecommunications that they have. They're going to be that's going to be enabling the fascist controllers to have complete control over civilization. So that's what is the device. It is called the graphene, which is a bioelectronic. Has electronics, biology. It's nano. It's so tiny. It's nano bioelectronics for the brain cloud connection through this entire sophisticated research and development that took place at Harvard, at MIT, the 2 main labs that were behind this, that were being financed by Bill Gates, that were being financed by Jeffrey Epstein's group, that were being financed by DARPA, US Defense Advanced Research Programs Agency, that you're talking about Moderna and their complicity, and the history showing it, proving it, is compounded by the MIT leader of this group, which was not Charles Lieber, who's in jail now for espionage with China, sending China the bioweaponry and the electronics for this brain cloud connection and the vaccine hydrogels. His counterpart at MIT, which has photographs of Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein going to visit these guys at MIT, his name is Robert Langer. He is the main official in Moderna. He's the main mover and shaker in financing and the agent that got military involved and basically advanced through what was called the Media Labs at MIT. This bioelectronic technology that is being censored. People are not talking about it. Jim Jordan is not even nearly addressing this. Conspiracy movement agents, whistleblowers, they're not addressing it adequately.
And this seems big, Len. I mean, to me, you talked about this a little last time with the show with Johnny, and that's what I was blown away by, this information. It definitely, everything ties together. Like even with like the Matrix showing you like just turn you into a battery in a pod. Everything you're saying makes so much sense. This all really makes sense to me.
They're speaking openly about it. Noel Harari at the World Health Organization talks about, if you think you're going to have private thoughts, think again. Every human being is hackable. I think it was Neuralink that you're talking about. Elon Musk has done several. And with Elon Musk, you never know if it's real or if it's a complete charade. I personally think he's just the front man for, as you said, DARPA, CIA operations that they want to put out there.
Yeah,
just to remind everybody, MIT, Harvard, Natick. Natick is the requisitioning for the Army up in Boston. They're all co-located, so they can actually combine all their effort within a very small area and combine all their manpower and operate almost silently while they do it. MIT is where John Trump was a electrical professor for 3 decades. He's the one who took Tesla's papers out when Tesla died. So all of this 5G and wireless, the thought is that it was developed out of that research and developed at MIT, and now it's being rolled out. That is a good segue, I think, into 528 hertz frequency. What we have against us arrayed is the issue of the Russia-Ukraine war. That's not the war that's going on in the world right now. That World War III is against us. And I think your uncovering of 528 and how we can fight back and how we can tap into some of the healing that is going to be necessary, because they seek a diseased and dying population over time, so that there's no culpability, so that no one can be shown to be the murderers that they are, that it happens over a long period of time. They seek to reduce the birth rate to 0 and negative, and have people die off slowly by poverty, through depression, poverty, anything they can do, as well as all the diseases they seek to have us get. So if you want to talk now about 528, I could say personally, I've used it since the year and a half ago I've talked to you, and I find it to be a very soothing and a very calming influence. I don't know if it's healing my cells, and I'd like to have you discuss how that happens. But I would, before we do that, let me pull up something I remember that I wanted to look. I looked at right after your last interview with Johnny, and it really was how sound affects water. And this was just shocking to me, how sound affects the movement of water. And again, our body is 80 to 85% water based. I mean, obviously there's other things in that water, but this was very interesting. And I'll just run this, see if you guys can give me a second here. Want to make sure I share the sound because it is, but this is a very, passing in front of these speakers. The water is going to trickle down. And you see that water it looks frozen, but it's passing through. To me, it's just a shock. It's shocking. It looks frozen, but it's only being affected by frequencies as they're being applied to running water. And they apply several different frequencies to this water, and it just changes. And it's just shocking. And you can imagine the implications. There's another interesting experiment they do where it looks like it's reversing the flow. It's still flowing out. Anyway, that's my little interesting addition to what I know is much more. It's much more complicated than that when it comes to 528. But maybe you can just tell us more about that now.
Well, now I would recommend that you read that book just above my head. It's the book of 528, Prosperity Key of Love. That's the book that has kind of like, wow, all of this intelligence based on the understanding of 528. What is it? It's at the heart of the musical, mathematical matrix of divine design or intelligent design, or what the physics call the matrix of the universal construction. And then what you're talking about, that water that's coming out being influenced by word, go back to Genesis 1:1 through 1:8. Right in the beginning of the Bible, you've got water there. Even before God is mentioned in the Bible, you've got water and God. So my opinion is that water should be recognized as liquid God. And it's like you said, approximately 80% of your body. Well, what does that say? You know, it says that basically at least 80% of you is liquid God. What basically, the creator is capable of doing is totally miraculous manifestations in this musical mathematical matrix. So the 528 frequency just happens to be the miracle note of the original musical scale. That's called the ancient solfeggio scale. And that incredibly, 528 just happens to be the heart of nature. It happens to be that greenish yellow color that is chlorophyll in plants. Grass is green because chlorophyll resonates 528 and it reflects it up into your eyes, which is the windows of your soul. And now you receive that greenish yellow color light, which science has proven is tremendously healing and tremendously relaxing.
Just looking at it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You go online, we publish this on Medical Veritas. There's one article up that shows if you just sit in front of green light, and I would recommend adding prayer, of course, and I can explain why. You would add prayer and you're getting bombarded with this greenish yellow color, core color of nature. Now think about this, dealing with prayer. Two things. I'll come back to prayer in a second. When you breathe, you're an organic being. Your organic chemistry ring, carbon 6, is 6-sided. That's 5 + 2 is 7 + 8 is 15. That's 1 + 5, 6. That's miracle 6. You're a miracle 6 crystalline being that has 80% God water in you. And now you're breathing in the breath of life produced where? The oxygen on this planet is produced primarily in two places. From chlorophyll, greenish yellow color. So when chlorophyll pigment is outputting from the leaves, it's outputting oxygen. That oxygen, element number 8, is spinning and spiraling in the frequency of love, 528.
Wow.
Nature. So when now going to prayer, applying this revelation to your practical application, in prayer, what is happening? You, in heartfelt, loving intention, in faithful prayer, you're resonating out that signal, that message, that prayer to God. And what happens is that miraculously, that intention, loving, faithful intention, you have to have faith. You see, none of this works if you're faithless, because faith is the essence of your relationship with the Creator. If you don't have faith in a partner and a spouse, the relationship is over, it's dead. But if you have faith in somebody, then you can actually have a communion, a communication, a divine understanding of gratefulness and thankfulness, of having a communication capability. And in physics, it's called coherence. Your heart resonates primarily in faithful, loving prayer in 528 frequency.
That's an excellent explanation. I had not heard you say it that way ever before, and I think that really rings true to me. Right, the frequency comes through to me, and I think the point is, if you're faking your faith, if you don't feel it, it's not going to vibrate. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not real. But if you are, that vibration comes from something even deeper in the way that you are constructed from the ground up.
Yeah. So,
Beautiful.
So next revelation that's significant is that once you have this understanding, it enables you to have a full inspiration by Holy Spirit vibration. In other words, like, just think about how simple this is and how obvious it is. You go to sleep, for example, totally tired, exhausted. You wake up in the morning, completely refreshed, renewed, rejuvenated, born again. How about baptism? Tired after a long day, hard day working. Go take a shower or a bath. What happens? Why did Jesus go to John the Baptist and then tell everybody, you're thinking about a Messiah, go to see John? Because that water, liquid God, actually restores by literally touching your skin and blessing your skin with the frequency resonance energy of 528 sacred geometry. The water molecule is in the Star of David. 528 frequency is the key of the house of David that opens doors that no man can open, closes doors that no man can close. That's Old and New Testament prophecy. That's Isaiah 22:22 and Revelation, which is now the end times revelation, is that the sixth angel, there again, you've got miracle 6, 5 + 2 is 7 + 8 is 15, 1 + 5 is 6. The miracle 6, do, re, mi, note, is heralded by the sixth angel for who? The city of Philadelphia, the church of Philadelphia. Go to King James Bible, go to Revelation 3:6-8, and you'll see what I'm telling you. The sixth angel who's preaching for salvation for the church of Philadelphia, brotherly love, brotherly love. Those who are loving then get to experience what Revelation 14:1 talks about, where we win, where we're protected in the end. And it's not all of us that are going to make it. It's literally a chosen few. It's a remnant. It's a remnant that actually have the understanding, the wisdom that I'm talking about, that gather in the end times, Revelation 14:1, to sing a new song in such a way as to instantaneously and miraculously deliver salvation and sustenance to those who have the open hearts and the divine connection to God, being again blessed by that Holy Spirit power of love, that the Creator is always there, always administering, always faithful, always wanted to simply bless us, uplift us, and heal us. That's what it's really all about. So
Yeah.
what we're witnessing is the global evil that is challenging the soul and spirit of humanity.
It's
And
very
that,
it speaks to me. I you know, in my reading of the Bible, there's always kind of a lot of people like to separate the physical from the spiritual. There are two, but they meld together, in my estimation. That you'll have a physical manifestation can also give you a spiritual understanding. This dovetails exactly with that kind of thought process, which is, there is a connection. There's a physical connection between the Creator and you. That is also that goes to faith. Jesus Christ said to his apostles, they will know you by your what? Knowledge? No. By your leadership? Or no, by your love. And they will know you by your love. Those are the apostles of Christ. And love is a vibration, the right kind of love. We're not talking about the commercialized love that we see today, but the right kind of love, the genuine vibration love that you're speaking about. The idea that could be quantified even and seen throughout nature is merely God speaking to us.
I
There's
heard that the rainbow also, real quick, isn't the rainbow at a vibration of 528?
yeah, the heart. See, it's of the heart. What are the values of the heart? You have love, you have joy, you have bravery, you have brave heart, and you have faith in the heart. So the heart is likewise connected energetically to the Creator's heart, as above, so below. Now, what evidence is there for that? The heart of sunshine is what you're speaking about. Sunshine is actually, the solar radiation is vibrating from hydrogen. The hydrogen electron that are coming off the sun, what's called solar radiation, the heart of that gives us the rainbow. That's the electromagnetic color spectrum.
Right.
What's at the heart of that is
Right.
this greenish yellow color of chlorophyll reflecting into the windows of your soul, your eyes, and then having it like the Holy Spirit power of love does when you sleep at night or you take a baptism. And so that's essentially simplest empirical evidence looking simply at nature and what we do as human beings and benefit from. We celebrate these revelations. We celebrate God's glory and administration of how this miraculous manifestation of divine design even takes place within us, each of us as individuals, if we have faith and love in our hearts.
And I would just add to that, a lot of my truth experience and understanding comes from looking at what they're attacking. Whatever they're attacking is what should be promoted as good. If you look at the whole climate change agenda, it's about destroying CO2, which is our food that creates the chlorophyll that you were talking about. Some of it may be good in terms of pollution and chemicals, but other aspects of it, the idea of regulating a human being's breath and that sort of thing, in the new transhumanist dystopia they're trying to put forward, is a nightmare. You look at music and tonality. In preparation for this show, I just went back to what I know the truth community knows about Tavistock and their role in creating rock and roll in the late 50s and 60s, and what they used. Have you ever come across, I'm sure you have, the concept of atonality and the Vienna School and how they used the 12 tones to change music really in the 20th century? I don't know if you're aware of any of that. Some of those names, let's see, Arthur Schoenberg, let's see, Theodore Adorno. It seemed that there was a concerted effort it looks like it came out of Vienna and Frankfurt in the 20s, maybe before that, to change music in the 20th century, and to create these tones that were dissonant. Previously, they had been much more, I guess, harmonious, but the new music was going to be less harmonious, and really jived with the century of war that we had in the 20th century, and then morphed into a new music that even classical musicians today bemoan the music that they hear on the radio as being just completely dissonant. Is that part of what you see as this agenda? And maybe you can also tell us how you got into 528 and how you figured it out the way you did.
Well, the book is called Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse. You can see that book. That's my third best-selling book.
We need to link all these, Vinny, by the way.
Yeah, Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse. And that revelation that started me on all of this 528 frequency information was presented to me by Dr. Joseph Paleo, who was a great Catholic. He was a devout Catholic, spirit-filled Catholic, who went to the bishops and the cardinals for the hymn to St. John the Baptist music. He simply wanted the 6 tones by which the hymn to St. John the Baptist, which was the most spiritually uplifting hymn of all the ages. So Joey, he's passed away now, but he went to the bishop and the cardinal and they refused. And so he prayed to Jesus. He said, Jesus, please bring me a revelation about the original solfeggio musical scale. And Jesus did that. And that's where the book Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse starts, with Joey's story. The first 6 chapters is all Joey's story. And then Joey, after he got the revelation in the Bible, you see there's a Bible code in the book of Numbers, chapter 7, verse 12 through 83. Repeating series of verse numbers. Every 6 verses is the same repeated, inane, virtually meaningless verse. It's a code. There's a code, and it lays out the solfeggio music: 396, 417, 528, 639, 741, and 852. Those were the 6 tones. So Jesus revealed that according to Joey, and I believe it's true. Jesus came, gave Joey the original musical scale, and then Joey prayed to Jesus, and he said, "Bring me Dr. Leonard Horowitz." What happened?
Connect the dots.
That's what happened. And through a series of divine appointments, divine synchronicities, about 3 months later, I ended up knocking on Joey's front door for a spaghetti dinner. And then he laid the whole project on me. And I, like a fool, I refused it. I refused it about a half a dozen times before it finally dawned on me that this was of God. And I said, okay, I got to get into it. And then basically,
and I think so. This is just complete layman's question. Does listening to 528 help soothe you? I mean, does it help heal you? Or does it simply eliminating all of the dissonant other frequencies? Is it a combination of both? How do you see that?
I think it's a combination of both. We put a lot of money and love into 528radio.com.
Okay.
The original site was 528records.com, where we sought to transpose all of the world's dissonant music into 528 love frequency vibration. That I needed probably $30,000, $40,000 to raise that much money. If there's somebody listening that wants to donate specifically for the restoration of 528records.com, please get in touch with us. The only thing that I was able to salvage, because we were heavily targeted, heavily hacked, the 528records.com website is no longer functioning. But what I salvaged from it is listenable on 528radio.com. And yes, I listen to it. Our friends, family listen to it regularly, and we feel it's soothing. It's good. It's a good selection. It's kind of like some of my own favorite music. but it's soothing, and we have the same theory that as we engage this 528 frequency vibration and we live it and we're surrounded by it, then that, just like a good prayer, you know, when we leave our car open and we don't want any intruders, we may pray. You say, Jesus, please, you know, put a blanket of protection around my car. That, you know, we do that for ourselves as well. And so that's what we do when we're just simply listening to 528radio.com. And our hope is that a lot of people will be benefited from it. And we think we're pretty successful because we get a lot of a wonderful thank you mail.
That's great. I think we're going a little bit. I think we're just about at an hour. Is that right, Ben? Have you been?
I'm not sure. I guess.
Well, I wanted to ask just
Dr.
one
Horowitz.
more question about the enemy and how you see music as their weapon to attack us, and how where should people be looking? I mean, you know, for example, I grew up listening to rock and roll, listen like anybody else, all the groups. You know, some of that stuff just nowadays, if I listen to it, to me is just completely empty, and is just kind of a drum beat, kind of brings up emotions that you don't want to necessarily have. You know, I think this has been a very targeted attack through our ears. But also I think it could be, as you mentioned earlier, you know, it could be a much more it will probably be a much more sophisticated attack through vibrations. If you've ingested this gel, or if we have graphene oxide in the food and we're somehow walking around as transmitters. How do you see this attack, and how, you know, what are the best ways do you suggest kind of turning off the old music? You mentioned recasting it in a 528 frequency. Is that available for everything?
You could take any music and convert it to 528.
Yep.
That's what they did.
You can do that.
Yes.
Okay.
And I remember, Len, 10 years ago with my partner Howard at the time, he tuned his guitar to 528. Remember that? And it was almost like playing itself.
Wow.
Sorry, I got that in the way here.
Okay. I probably just need to learn more about that, but how about just let me get back to an issue you had before about this, you know, the attack coming, and if you've ingested one of these vaccines, or you have this stuff inside you, how is that going to operate? Is it going to go through a 5G network? Is it going to be a combination of 5G, maybe electrical pulses? Anything, any ideas you have on that?
Well, let me just conclude by saying that what you're talking about is intertwined with spirit. This is an attack on the soul of civilization, of human beings. It is literally a satanic. Yes, we can look at people like Fauci and we can say these are pathogenic liars. We can say, oh yeah, they're criminal psychopaths. But fundamentally, this is really evil. This is really to take what God's most magnificent creation is we the people, and then literally convert it, subvert it, undermine it, and cause it to convert into artificial intelligence controlled population of cyborgs. So it's an attack, just like Biden said the other day, this is an attack for the soul of America and Americans. It really is, but not in the sense that he's talking about.
Right.
You know, so this is really the essence. So when you talk about where their technology is going for transhumanistic conversion, it's in the vaccination injections. The hydrogel contains the graphene, the bioelectronics that they will induce the brain cloud connection and have the capability then for controlling the population optimally in real time. Then, if you want to get out of that, just like Jesus said, come out of her, my people, lest ye be infected by her plagues and her hypocrisy and the insanity. In this case, the transhumanist manipulation of the population. Come out of that. How do you do it? You need a miracle. God's presented us, and I've shared tonight, I've shared the miracle frequency of universal creation. I've recommended faith and trust in the Creator, in that essence of love that does all the healing. Love is the universal healer. Water is the universal solvent. It is what makes DNA sing. DNA is an antenna to God. It receives and transmits sound and light signaling because it has special structured water inside each DNA strand. That's been proven in science already. So now you come out of that manipulation and you surround yourself with not just great music at 528 frequency optimally. And by the way, the old music, some of the enlightened musicians in the old days had actually tuned, just like Vinny was just talking about, their instruments to 528. Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin was produced in 528. John Lennon's Imagine was produced. He actually went through the trouble of retuning his white piano to play in C528. So you have this capability of protecting ourselves. Virtually imagine living full-time in baptism, living full-time in divine human communion, expressing love and joy and prosperity in all great ways. Then you're in the zone. That's the zone of creativity and healing miraculously. That's really our objective here. I think you share it as a Christian man. I share it as a Judeo-Christian man. Anybody that has some semblance of sanity today and spirituality has that level of consciousness to basically then provide the recommendations and the salvation. Literally, because we're talking about saving souls, we're talking about saving spirit and human lives.
I think your point resonates with me completely. That you know, it's an individual decision to come out, to make these changes to your life. You know, I think the same is true of, you know, dietary decisions you make in this context. There's a whole lifestyle change of connecting back to this to God through this frequency, because the frequency itself isn't God. It's an expression of God. I think you would agree.
Yes.
But no, very enlightening. I didn't know nearly as much about all of this as that you gave in the last 30 minutes that I do now. And I would tell everybody to go out and get Dr. Horowitz's books, understand it further, and hopefully at some point we can talk this through a little bit more. But thank you very much for being with us today.
Something else
Anything
too,
more?
real quick.
Go ahead, man.
Also, I think the tone also was in Latin. It was MI, which stood for miracle. I wanted to add that also. Am I right, Dr. Horowitz, on that?
Yes, it's MI stands for Miragistorum in Latin. In English, it's miracle.
Nice. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for spending time with us on this Sunday, and I look forward to talking to you again, Doctor. Thank you again.
Take care.
Okay, you too. Thank you, Vinny. Bye.